If God said to you, "What do you want me to do for you?" what would you ask for?
What are the things that for you make life worth living? What do you find yourself daydreaming about most? What are the things that, if you couldn't have them, would make you feel your life was empty and pointless?
In Mark chapter 10, two of Jesus' disciples, James and John, tell Jesus exactly what they want from him. And under the circumstances, their words couldn't be any more inappropriate.
But first, before James and John tell Jesus what they want from him, Jesus tells James and John what he is going to do for them. "We are going up to Jerusalem," he said, "and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise." So how will James and John respond to the news that their closest friend of the past 3 years is about to be brutally murdered?
Grief? Greed.
Then James and John came to him. "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do for us whatever we ask." "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left, in your glory."
Although they've just called Jesus teacher, there's clearly something about Jesus' teaching they haven't yet understood. He is deliberately going to give up his life for others. They, on the other hand, are desperately trying to hang on to their lives for themselves.
And this is not the first time the disciples have revealed a petty, small-minded lust for glory. 3 times in Mark's Gospel, Jesus tells his disciples that he must suffer, die, and rise again. And the incredible thing is that on 2 occasions, the disciples react by thinking of their own greatness. They want power and prestige. They want importance and status and recognition. Like many of us, they want to win. But Jesus wants something different for them, something infinitely better. "You don't know what you're asking," Jesus said. "Can you drink the cup I drink, or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?"
Now what Jesus means here is, can you do what I will do?
Can you die on behalf of sinners? Can you bring down the barrier separating sinful human beings from their Creator once and for all, so that they can have an infinitely satisfying relationship with God? And can you be raised to life again to prove that death and sin have been conquered? "We can," they answered.
But of course they can't. Like you and me, James and John need to be saved themselves from God's rightful anger at sin. As Jesus said, they don't know what they're asking. They're blind to the fact that the joy of following Jesus isn't found in status, it's found in service.
When the other disciples find out what James and John have been saying to Jesus, we read that they became indignant with them. And let's be honest, that's not because they think James and John were wrong to ask for power. It's because they wish they'd thought of it first. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. That's the way of the world, and it's the way of James and John. We try to grasp for power so that we can lord it over other people. But now listen to the way Jesus turns things upside down. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be slave of all." Jesus says, if you're really my disciples, everything's got to change. If you really want to be first in the kingdom of God, if you really want to win, get ready to serve.
But why would anyone want to trade in status for service? How can we possibly loosen our grip on the things that we want so badly? The reason James and John and the other disciples are grasping after these things is because they don't understand that Jesus is already offering them something infinitely more valuable. himself. Even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. You see, if Jesus had simply given them what they wanted, it never would have satisfied them anyway. No amount of power or money or achievement or family or friendship or sex or spirituality is ever enough in itself. We just want more.
And there's a reason for that. The deepest cravings we have, the ones that we unsuccessfully try to fill with all these other things, can only be fully satisfied by loving and serving the one who made us. It's the way he made us to be. We go looking for contentment and satisfaction and fulfillment in all the wrong places, and we chase after them in the hope that they'll give us what only God can. In the Bible, it's called idolatry, turning something God has created into a substitute for God. It's turning a good thing into a God thing.
And Jesus' closest disciples do it, even when Jesus has just personally offered them the greatest treasure in the entire universe.
The writer C.S. Lewis once said, "We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased."
That's James and John. That's us. Far too easily pleased. If only we had eyes to see it.
But Mark chapter 10 ends with real hope, because there, ironically enough, is a blind man with perfect vision. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me."
Bartimaeus is different from the disciples in many ways. Apart from the fact of his physical blindness, he's a beggar who has nothing of any material value apart from his cloak. He doesn't call Jesus teacher, but Son of David. In other words, God's king in God's world. It's the only place in Mark that someone recognizes Jesus in this way. And notice that rather than coming to Jesus with a demand that Jesus should do for him whatever he asks, Bartimaeus knows he deserves nothing, has nothing to offer, and simply cries out for mercy.
Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me."
Unlike the disciples who care about their own status, Bartimaeus is willing to make a fool of himself in the eyes of others so long as he's able to get close to Jesus.
Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus.
The cloak is all he has of any material value, but he lets it fall to the ground because he knows that standing right in front of him there is something, or someone, of infinitely greater value.
"What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see."
To Bartimaeus, Jesus is more than just a teacher. He uses a word that in the original language means master. Master, he says, I want to see. And that, ironically, is exactly the request James and John should have made.
"Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road.
James and John and Bartimaeus are asked exactly the same question by Jesus. What do you want me to do for you? And isn't it striking that while the disciples are rebuked by Jesus for their request, Bartimaeus is healed, a word which literally means saved. Why does Jesus respond differently? Because while the disciples demand that Jesus do whatever they ask of him, Bartimaeus knows he's in no position to make demands. He knows he needs mercy.
Although James and John are blind to it, blind Bartimaeus knows that the greatest treasure in the entire universe is standing right in front of him. He knows it can't be grabbed with a grasping fist. All he can do is open up his hand, beg for mercy, and begin to follow Jesus.
So how should we respond to Jesus? What do you want him to do for you?